Welcome everybody to Daylight Talks. This is a venue hosted by Velux, and today is being held at Aarhus School of Architecture. Daylight Talks, it's basically a series of talks investigating the significance of daylight in architecture. So it's very specifically about that. And today with the Aarhus School of Architecture, we have the pleasure to invite Estar architects. This is Aurora and Stefano. Thank you very much for being part of it. I've been invited to introduce Stefano and Aurora recently, and it's quite a pleasure to do that because I've been collaborating with them for a while. And it's maybe a little bit interesting to understand the context from what they're working from and what they are, coming from as well. They are an office, an architectural practice established in Santiago de Compostela and Geneva, both in Spain and Switzerland. And they are pretty much working within some international projects across Spain, Switzerland, and Portugal. Their backgrounds actually starts in London and in Barcelona. And I think some of their work still reflects very much the way they've been studying, teaching, and working for all the practices in their early experience. I would say that some of their recent projects in the past 10 years have been considering a considerable importance for the development of their practice today and their positioning within architecture and some of the topics that we will discuss today in relation to daylight and so on. And namely, two recent projects that they have won on public competitions in Switzerland, in Geneva. One of them, an Ancien Manège, that is going to be shown later today, which is a public civic center, and another one, which is a museum for archaeological remains. There are both two buildings that very much investigate certain topics about the importance of a place, the properties of a place, the way you experience the place, the materials and the use of it, to the construction of these places in buildings and materials and structures, and the perception of such structures. At the same time, both Stefano and Aurora have been very much invested in teaching. They have been appointed professors some years ago in London, both at London Met and Kingston in East London, as well as being part of teaching activities in the school before, in Aarhus School of Architecture, as they are now appointed visiting associate teachers at the school. And we will later on see, I think, such results of these investigations and their projects in the presentation. And I hope you really enjoy it. Just before I hand you the word and the mic, we just want to tell you that there's going to be a round of questions in the end. Stefano and Aurora are going to present for 45 minutes, and then there's 30 minutes for Q&A. You can write your questions in the webpage of Velux, or Daylight Talk webpage. There's a chat, and then we can run it here. Or we can just ask directly from the audience. There's two mics open, so we're going to moderate that. Okay, so please welcome me, welcoming Stefano and Aurora to the stage. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, good afternoon all here and in other places. Thank you, Gonzalo, for the last minute introduction. As Rasmus was not well, and thank you for the kind words about our work. Aurora and I are very, very grateful to the Aarhus School of Architecture, first of all, for inviting us to be here. And then also, Daylight Architecture, Tina, Vlogs, for the invitation to participate to this series of lectures for Day Talk. And thank you also for coming and being here. It's nice to be in a room with real people after many lectures that we gave on screens. This is a picture of me and Aurora in our, well, it's not our studio anymore, but of our former studio. And we like this image because I think it depicts, in a way, the way we explore architecture as a craft, as a kind of manual craft. And we like to say that our work kind of seeks for a clarity and precision in a wide range of scales, from territories to landscape. But over the years, either for choice or for chance, our work has been focusing mainly on delicate work for buildings, cities, and territories of cultural value.
So we are going to start this talk with a garden that we did for the Jardin des Métis in Quebec, Canada, that is called Rotunda. Rotunda is a reflection on the fundamental themes of the art of garden. The project was inspired by historical garden pools, circular architectures like the Pantheon, land art interventions, as well as natural elements like rock pools or leaves that collect water as the umbilicus rupestris.
Yes.
Conceived as a device capturing the beauty of nature, its intention is to transform the surrounding landscape into the garden itself by capturing what is outside its boundaries. Water and light are used as raw materials in order to create a reflecting surface. All we have to build was a support, a basin that suspends the water above the ground. As we could not visit Quebec during its design, it was developed as an abstract piece that then we placed in Grand Métis during our stay. It's a nearly circular, homogeneous black object. Seamlessly, with no expression of construction, not revealing the contact with the ground. We wanted it to be somewhere surrounded by mature trees in the proximity of a path and somehow in an intimate place away from the crowds in the gardens. It should be something one discovers within nature. We wanted for the ground to be modified as little as possible, with minimal clearance of plants, leaves, or other organic materials. The intention was to minimize the impact on the site in order to strengthen the relationship of the artificial object with the natural surrounding context. The form of the basin is I don't know if you prefer to
I'll pick up.
that.
So the form of the basin is a kind of complex double curvature surface, but essentially is an inverted truncated cone with a circular bottom plane of about 18 centimeters at the base, and an irregular top that varies between 4 and 4.5 meters. The geometry was, the geometry in the plan was determined by its center. We see here in this plan. So in order to determine the geometry, we divided the shape into 20 sections with a common center, and then a specific length of varying length. We created a series of arcs that then went to create the whole form. Also the section, the geometry of the section is also determined in a similar way, with arcs varying in radius, but that have common control points, no? At starting point at 0, and then going up to the middle point at 25 centimeters, and then the top plane reaching 35 centimeters above the ground. It was built, fabricated in the local workshop in Grand Métis. And essentially, what we built was an inverted concave mold that we see here, that was constructed implementing, simple 18 millimeter thick plywood. Then, we cut the 20 sections, which are arranged on a polar array every 18 degrees. Then sections of plywood went to sort of bridge the different forms, creating a surface which is, this inverted cone. The mold was then filled and sanded down to a smooth finish, and the basin was then cast as a fiberglass single seamless piece. In order to kind of augment its reflective properties, and also to kind of minimize its presence as an object, the entire basin is a matte black with pigment integrated directly into the fiberglass. We wanted the blackness to be deep and solid, something we could not achieve with an application of a layer of paint. We wanted the material to be black in its core. The garden was then filled with water at the beginning of its life and was left to evolve over time.
The garden became a climate register device, sensible to changing light conditions, fluctuations in temperature and humidity, rainfall and evaporation. The garden over time accumulated leaves, dust and pollen, and was inhabited by birds and insects, leading to the cultivation and growth of new life within the garden. Rotunda is an elemental and contemplative garden based in the atmospheric and poetic perception of nature, daylight, and the passing of time.
Okay. So that was one of our first projects that we completed in the studio. The second project we would like to talk about this afternoon is the Ancien Manège, that was mentioned also by Gonzalo, in Geneva, Switzerland. It was a competition that we won back in 2014 and that we completed in the summer of 21. Don't know if any of you knows Geneva, but for those of you that don't know the city, Geneva is located in the bottom of what is the Lake Léman or Lake Geneva. When the lake becomes, where is this pointer? Okay, when the lake becomes the river Rhône, and the Ancien Manège, it's a building which is located here. It's this darker dot, which is it's on the edge of the historic city of Geneva. And another thing that we marked in this plan, the red line highlights kind of the heritage protection zone of affection that affects both the historic city and its environs. So the Ancien Manège is located here at the edge of the city, and in one of the kind of historic entrances to the medieval town. The building was originally built between 1828 and 1829 as an initiative by the government of the time, and it was built by an architect called François Breuer, and its use was a municipal horse riding hall, mostly used by the military forces. So the composition of the building followed what was the canon for military buildings of the early 19th century. So we have a covered arena at the center of the construction that is flanked by 2 wings of stables. And then we have this quite singular semicircular rotunda that at the time determined the main entrance to the building and housed a series of services for the building. And then this volume kind of completes the central volume of the horse riding arena. Then we see more on the first floor plan. The building is, the 4 corners of the building are defined by 4 towers that housed kind of secondary spaces and define the corners of the building. So then in the section is quite interesting because we see that the difference in height between the horse riding hall and the stables allowed for natural light and ventilation to enter the central space. And then also these allowed to also ventilate a huge loft structure that was used to house the hay, for the horses. So those are sections of the building in its original configuration of the 19th century. And it was, it was maintained as such. It was used as a horse riding hall until the beginning of the century. Here we have a picture, one of the earliest pictures in Geneva, depicting. We see the building here on the left, and within the context of the historic city. But following the increase of the popularity of the car at the time, and the rejection of equestrian activity in the city center, in the 1930s it was first transformed into a garage. So at the time here it was already called the garage of Baudefort, in the historic city, and this apparently was the first pump station for petrol in the city. To further augment the capacity as a parking for vehicles, the building was considerably transformed in the 1950s, following a project by the architect Jean Camoletti. And the introduction of, we see here, the introduction of 2 reinforced concrete slabs completely modified the composition of the building. We see some images here, of how those images taken by David Grandage, a London-based photographer, of the existing building before we started the works. So we see how the coexistence of the 1950s intervention with the 19th century structure. So we see here how the ramps to access the different levels modify the spatial configuration of the building. And a series of kind of larger openings were made in the building as and then the new volumes to allow, this image here, we see the volume that was built for cars to go to the second floor. So the fact that the Manège was an under-utilized infrastructure originated in a participatory process promoted by the associations of inhabitants of the old city that was called Manège Partout, whose aim was returning the building to the life of the city. So we see them here as a series of meetings that they had inside the building, still used as a car park. Now we see the car still there, in which, as an association, they debated about the potential of this building to become a public building again, and not just for cars. So the proposals for the association led to a competition that was launched by the Geneva Town Hall in 2014 for a multi-purpose building. This is one of the early competition images for the creche, which was one of parts of the program, a toy library, spaces for the neighborhood association, and also a large space, large space that also became a school restaurant for nearby schools that needed this facility. So those were a series of images that our photographer Andres Fraga took at the time of the competition. So the project, the point of departure of the project is the comprehension of the spatial and construction configuration of the building as found, and assessing its potential to become an inhabitable building with minimum intervention and transformation. So the project proposes the reutilization and adjustment of existing structural and construction elements combined with selected demolitions and punctual repairs and minimum additions with the intention of utilizing the atmospheric, architectural and thermal qualities of the various parts of the building. Again, here is a series of model pictures in parallel to kind of images before the commencement, the start of the work on site.
As part of the another important part of the project was to redefine the public space and to regain as well the exteriors of the building for the use of the people and pedestrians. No, let's say the building now is accessed from the room Julien Pichot via a new pavement that clarifies the urban block, establishing a visual relationship with the Bourg de Faux, that is the space where with the trees is a square in the old town, the main square in the old town, and the new public space in this fountain and new public space in the proximity of the entrance. The main entrance hall for the public space is placed in one of these towers, Stefano was explaining, on the left side of the building, becoming a double height entrance space where the various construction periods coexist. This is a space that we did, it was semi-external, and we didn't need to insulate, and that allows us to show the stone construction of the original building, the concrete qualities of the construction of the 50s, and then let's say the 20th century interventions. Accessing the building from the towers allows for the semi-circular rotonde to become a living room, a urban living room in direct relation with the street, preserving again the 1950s concrete structure and balconies. The lower concrete slab is preserved, forming a service plinth where all the common services are placed, liberating from obstructions all the perimeter spaces with windows on the exterior. The intermediate concrete slab is partially demolished to liberate the large openings and obtain a generous salle, also service from the service plinth. All the new additions are realizing good, taking the form of partitions that define the large block of services on the ground floor and the two large partitions that acoustically exclude the salle from the rest of the building. The result of the demolition of the higher volume in Rue Saint-Liger allow us to do the only new structural addition, that is this new roof over the south wing that forms the crèche, and becomes a new terrace on the upper level, protected from the direct sunlight by a pergola that also gives some protection into the interior of the salle. In order for the salle to be occupied by multiple users simultaneously or used as one large room for special occasions, a suspended structure can be lowered or lifted to form a partially separated space within the salle. This element is hung from the existing timber structure and lifted via central via central skylight that also provides natural light and ventilation to the salle.
So the project, one of the ambitions of the project was to try to make compatible the optimization of the thermal envelope of the building and the conservation of the aerial qualities of the structure. In order to minimize the intervention into the existing timber structure of the roof, we maintained the insulation barrier below the structure that allowed us to preserve and maintain the structure in its entirety without modifications. Then new insertions of the building have different ways of dealing with the existing structure. So there is a series of more, we call stereotomic, of mineral interventions, which are made, we see in this case, with kind of Ytong insulating blocks, or on the right we see also carved stone, which these interventions go and complete and try to reassemble somehow lost clarity of the existing building. Then there is another kind of layer, which is the one that is made out of wood and utilizing wood construction and a kind of light construction that is more related with kind of the current use of the building, and about an idea about kind of possible modification in the future. So there is a kind of dichotomy between kind of permanent and non-permanent interventions. Where am I? So the introduction of this kind of tectonic dichotomy allowed us to establish an order of construction that manifests in the adaptability over time. And the intention is not to establish a new formal language opposed to the existing, but rather establish a conversation between the new elements and those already in place. In this case, we see it here in the toy library, where there is the preserved structure as found of the building interacts with this new mezzanine that we inserted to create a small space for kids to play on this upper level. So to finalize on this project, so there is a kind of idea of time, of how the building was used over time. We really like this idea that we are just doing a new layer of the history of this building for its common use, and this new layer is really adapted to the contemporary demand of the building in terms of its use. And these two images we highlight the handrails and the tactile moments, of these moments when somebody touches a building, the handrails, they're really important in kind of that experience of the building.
Okay. So the third and final project we want to present to you is the Bastion Saint-Antoine, a project that we won in a competition in 2017 for a museum and public space, again for the Geneva municipality. In this plan of 1841, you can see the city of Geneva still fully enclosed by fortifications that were only 10 years after start to be removed to give way to the 19th century expansion of the city. The Bastion Saint-Antoine is placed here. You can see the Manège, actually, it was already built there. And the Bastion Saint-Antoine is there on the east side of the city, of the historic city. In this print that was 1814, so it's earlier than the plan, you can see the city of Geneva So you can see the view from the Bastion towards the lake on the background, and the fortifications that were still in place, and depicts this end of the Bastion as a public space, with all the kids playing and these people, as a urban balcony. Located in the proximity of one of the gates into the historic city, the ensemble of both the Promenade de Saint-Antoine, that is this long promenade, and the Bastion of Saint-Antoine form one key public space for the historic city of Geneva nowadays. The Bastion was an archaeological site between 2012 and 2015, and the excavations enabled to discover first century Gallo-Roman remains next to a church and a necropolis of more of 300 tombs dated between the 9th and the 12th century, and sections of the 15th century fortifications that were then readapted. The competition brief asked for a museum building that enabled to expose the ensemble of the archaeological remains in optimal condition of preservation. These are the pictures of the model we present for the competition. And while offering a public space of the quality demanded by its location in the city. Here you see the esplanade and how it relates with the Museum of Art in Geneva. The point of departure of our project is the comprehension of the Bastion, of this public space, as an open public space entirely accessible, maintaining the condition of its condition of a urban balcony. The esplanade is conceived as one large surface where various objects are placed, 2 geometric groups of trees, a series of small volumes for the museum, and an existing fountain that we maintain in place. The rectangular group of trees above, the more kind of squarish, is a continuity with the ones in the boulevard, the promenade of Saint-Antoine, while the long, more linear group at the bottom relates more with the wall above the boulevard below. Both the existing ones in the promenade and the new ones, they redefine the entrance a new entrance for the historic city. And the opening resulting from the geometry of the 2 new proposed group of trees mark the access to the new museum at the end of the esplanade, which continues to function as a belvedere. As our intention was to prioritize the public use of the space and bring the archaeology into the everyday life of the inhabitants and visitors to the old town. So the museum emerges as in the form of 3 lanterns, essentially, that we see here, whose disposition if you look in the previous plan, there is a kind of awkward position in between them, but the reason they are positioned like this is that because they are directly linked with the remains below. So the disposition is kind of directly linked to the archaeological remains. This small one brings light to the 1st century Gallo-Roman remains. And then there is a second one here, which is this more elongated one, which finds the geometry of the church, of the found church of Saint Laurent, and then also brings light to these coffins and skeletons that we saw in the previous image. And then the larger lantern sits
tangent to part of the kind of 15th century fortifications here. And then there is another kind of element which sits here, which is in relationship with another portion of kind of Renaissance fortification. No? So this is a plan that we developed quite early on in the project, which is kind of historic superposition of the layers that are below. Some of them still exist, some of them don't. No? That helped us to determine the geometry of the position of these lanterns. No? This is a plan cutting at the entrance level of the museum. So we see that these two lanterns are essentially two voids. They're just two buildings which whose function is to bring natural light down to the museum. And then they have a window here that allows for the public to then see parts, fragments of the archaeological remains. No? And then the larger lantern provides entrance to the museum, and then there is kind of a small reception space for somebody that kind of works here, giving tickets and allowing visitors. Then a long and narrow stair that leads you down, and a lift for reduced mobility users. And then also there is a big void that allows glimpses below. So the lanterns become at the same time urban elements, that define public space, with a bench and their own kind of building construction, not belonging to the public space of the city. But there are also kind of complex devices that allow for natural light, control natural light to lit the archaeological museum below. So we liked this idea that the lanterns become this manifestation of the presence of the remains in the city, in the daily life of the city, and then these carefully placed openings allow for the general public passing by to with their dog to kind of look down and have a glimpse of the remains. Then the museum itself, it's an experience that is more to do, like you have these fragments that you see from the public space, and then the visitor, that with the ticket or on demand can access the entire building, and then the one then sees the ensemble of the remains. So the lower level of the museum is just one single space, where all the remains coexist, one next to each other, that are under this large, long slab that is the extension of the public space. Just perforated punctually by these lanterns that bring kind of natural light down to the remains. This section in particular is the one that cuts through the first century remains, and then how the lantern kind of relates geometrically to it. So the museum is accessed, as we saw in the plan, is accessed by a small entrance hall. So it's just a room that allows for the visitors to enter, sit down in a bench over here, and probably acquire a ticket, and then also they can have, through this window, they have glimpses of the remains below. This is a 1:10 model that actually Gonzalo worked on this. That depicts this process of going down to the from the small entrance down to the space below. And we at the time we worked quite carefully that we need to work on a kind of light transition from being kind of outside to an interior space, and then going down, so that the eye needed time to adapt. The pupils needed time to adapt to that change in light. So the stair is this kind of device that does that. Where am I? Okay, so to reduce to the minimum the presence of the building on the public space level, we try to push as much as we could all the services and technical parts below. So we propose to do a further excavation here, on this space here. So this is the 15th century fortification, and then we have the Roman remains, the medieval, and all the necropolis here. So we pushed all these services to this side in order to reduce the volume upstairs, but also to create this very large room where all these kind of archaeological founds coexist, no? So this is one of the spaces that results from that. Is the space that we saw in the plan here. Is the space here where basically groups can gather, or classrooms can gather. There is maybe a projection or elements that integrate the museum visits, and then we see here the natural light entering filtered through the lantern. So this is we saw that was the photograph of the model, and then this is the section depicting how that lantern works and bringing light down to the space. This is an image from the foyer of the museum. So we see how this kind of prefabricated concrete path kind of leads the visitors meandering through the archaeological remains, punching through an existing cut in the 15th century fortification. Then creating a peripheral route where all the remains can be visible. No? Particular attention was given to the position and the design of the openings of the lanterns. Because there was this kind of dichotomy. The project really is born from how to bring natural light to the museum, but at the same time we have to protect the remains from direct light. So we had to work very, very carefully in their positioning and the way these elements kind of controlled, and how precisely how to control the light precisely, for this museum experience. So these are a series of drawings that we did in the project phase, in which we explore how all the windows of the lanterns are facing north. Then this is the angle of the light in the most kind of negative scenarios for us in terms of direct light. So we see that light is always kind of coming at an angle and never impacting directly into the center of the space. And then also we explored the position of the glass. There's a big effort in terms of bringing the facade, the insulation and the glazing back to the internal face of the lantern to reduce the glare in the glass, so people can really see below. Then in the section, this was kind of weeks and weeks of work and try to determine this. So we see that like the lantern, we have an opening at the top with natural light also still in the various angles. Then there is a slab, another concrete slab, part of the structure which is just below. And this allowed to create a kind of light chamber. We call it, we like to call it, no? So this chamber allowed for natural light to enter, bounce off, and then diffuse on the sides of the lantern. And then this kind of chamber also allowed for artificial light to be introduced. So then we could really kind of we never see where the actual light is coming from. Huh? Mm-hmm. Then that resulted in this idea that kind of light in the museum would be always the same: day, night, summer, winter, autumn. So almost like time has stopped, and then there is kind of continuum between this idea of light and space, that almost, we have stopped the time, and all those remains kind of coexist, almost frozen in time. No? Another difficulty was that as the actual building substance of the Bastion was part of the exhibition, part of the exhibits, no, we couldn't really insulate, let's say, normally as you would do in a building, no, that you have a kind of layer insulation on the inside. So with the physics engineers, we developed this strategy that we consider this space as a semi-external space. It's not an interior. That allows us to just have kind of minimum thermal insulation applied on the slab here, and then also the lanterns include thermal insulation here. Then this insulation is only needed for the space not to freeze in the winter, and then not to get too hot in the summer. So it kind of fluctuates between 12 and 18 degrees, maybe 20 in the summer. No? Then also, but for the person that is working there, we needed to guarantee a kind of an inside environment. No? So then the only technically insulated space, or let's say technical interior, is this room here, no? Which is the room for the person that works in the reception. No? And then these spaces start to become already kind of semi-external, no, in their treatment. Those are some kind of extracts from our construction drawings. So, the result is this technically semi-exterior space that is kept from freezing, no, as we said. And then we, to explore this kind of raw spatial qualities of this museum, the density of the natural light created by the lanterns, this kind of cold and almost damp atmosphere of the museum, we built this huge 1:20 model of the entire building that was photographed by Andres Fraga, which is also here with us, with only natural light. So these images that we see here, it's essentially it's a physical model that was photographed with natural light. So in here we kind of depict the museum sequence we are seeing here. So this image below, we see the three lanterns, how they coexist in the space, and then we have kind of glimpses of the medieval remains, the Roman remains at the top, and then how this soft light catches the geometry of the Renaissance constructions. Then we're turning around and we're seeing the tombs within the space of the church. So again here we see another of the images kind of walking around the perimeter. There is a space to kind of go down and get a bit closer to the remains. No? So really the intention of our lecture today was to kind of present to you our way of working with natural light as a raw material, so a physical material that is constantly changing and is constantly reacting with what is around it and also affecting our emotions. Thank you.
So I come to moderate the Q&A now. We have around 25 minutes for questions that I think it's quite interesting to take advantage of. And there are some questions in the chat, but it would be interesting to give you the room first and hear from you. Is there any questions?
Thank you. I was just asking about in your designs, I see a lot of darkness in terms of it's about daylight, and I would like to hear how important you think that you also, it's not only focusing on the daylight but also the shadows in the room.
I think it's an interesting question. I think that's why we also today we kind of presented both the Ancien Manège, which I think it's more of a project that sort of comes from light. No, we have a kind of structure that is existing, and then we preserve, and also we kind of work with the light conditions that the building gives us, not trying to optimize them to become a kind of civic building.
Yeah, in there we use a lot natural light as a way to organize the program, maybe. No, it helps you to say which uses require the light or the connection with the outside, that sometimes is a similar thing, not always, but and push them into the facade, and then there were darker spaces that came into the center and allow us to keep the slabs. But maybe Stefano can explain it better. I leave to him, because I guess something that you can see a lot in painting, that if you don't have the dark side, you cannot see the light, no? And that we learned it at the beginning with, for example, with gardens that we did, some before of the Rotunda, some other ones, where the plants, you see more the plants against a black background, no? Like the Suntor Pavilion in London, no? That was kind of fantastic how he did this enclosed garden, all black around, and then there was just light in the center where the plants were. So somehow it helps to emphasize and we believe to kind of solidify that light, no? But it's something that I guess in paintings they did a lot.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of going. No? That I think in the Manège there is kind of this dichotomy to say, okay, there is these spaces which are dark in the building, in the center of the building is quite a deep plan, and we acknowledge that instead of kind of working against it, we say, okay, which parts of the programs can actually go in these spaces, no? So I think that was maybe more of a rational approach. I think in Saint-Antoine, we see it more, we can embrace it even more, almost like a Caravaggio painting, that he builds up, from the darkness, then it's the light, and then the light is able to kind of highlight the scene, and then he sets up a kind of mood or atmosphere, no? So I think the two projects are kind of complementary, no? But I think as I think it's I think daylight. I think there is this interesting aspect that daylight, as you might intend generically, maybe it's more about lightness or whiteness or clarity, But I think also there is this aspect of daily light which is about depth, about darkness, about thickness of light, And then also another aspect that I think is quite interesting is that daylight has a kind of perception of phenomenological advantage, Let's say, we really enjoy natural light in a space, in a room, but then natural light also goes together with kind of radiation from the sun, so then we have to kind of sometimes protect from the sun. So I think it's quite interesting, especially in the Manège, how also that process of how the pergola became an element that mediates between that kind of excess of light almost, and how you protect from that. Is this kind of almost the extremes, That's the kind of the extreme in which when you have too much light, how you do with that, and then what do you do when you have too little? I don't know if it answers your. Any more? Any from our students? Yeah, we have one here. Good. I think the questions are there. The thing is breaking the ice.
In the third or the middle project, the second project with the horse saal, I noticed it was all white. All the constructions were painted. All the layers, the honesty of the building was removed in order to paint it all white, the color of white. Can you tell me the arguments for this choice of removing this honesty, so to speak?
You can.
Okay, that was a big debate that we also had at a certain moment, with the client and the people, when we had all the materials, the stone was stone, the wood was wood, the concrete was concrete. but that was something that we had explored quite early on from the very beginning of the project. That then it kind of evolved more and more through the layers, in which through the phases of the project, was that we started explore this idea of paint as a material itself, not just something that we cover stuff, but it's a material itself for us. No, paint is matte, paint is shiny, gloss. So it becomes a material. No, when you start thinking it that way, and then we also start questioning that also. So maybe some of maybe the authenticity that we see of materials, no, of that rawness, no, sometimes is not so truthful, no, because it's, you know, concrete sometimes is actually painted to protect it, or and wood. So I don't know. So in here the main intention was that we wanted to all the historical phases, 19th century, 1950s. Also there was some 1980s interventions, and ours, to kind of sing and talk to each other, at kind of at the same level, So kind of paint as a material helped us to kind of bring down the tone of all of these parts, and then they kind of start to coexist with each other, Then the subtleties are more about texture, the quality. Here on the side, for instance, we see sort of there is parts of the 19th century wall that coexist with kind of 20th century elements which have been, infilled, and ours, So this heterogeneous character of this wall is kind of muted down, and at the end what we have is a kind of homogeneous kind of color, but an intensity in the texture,
It's something that it comes difficult to see in the pictures, but there is a lot of texture, and when you are there, you notice quite well. So it's not trying to hide anything. So you see the old timber there, for example, in the ludothek. Mm-hmm. You see all the cracks and how it's open and how it's timber. While the new one,
there was another image here,
it's completely smooth, and they were painted the same color, that is a gray, and it was a bit glossy. It was a paint for timber. Yeah, while the ones on the wall is
chalk paint.
It's chalk paint that allow us to keep the walls ventilating, and it helps for some qualities of the space. But there are a lot of subtleties in there. It's not all white. Then in here you might not notice, but the idea was that we were doing a ludothek for this space for kind of today, and it was just one space. We felt that the building was so different, in all the rooms were different. The people that were gonna use them, they are different entities, that they needed to coexist, and somehow this white background was the thing that maybe unified the building as an entity. But
and then also going back, maybe in Saint-Antoine was more an idea of kind of blackness, which is the background, then elements that highlight, then this kind of neutrality, and then these sensible kind of variations of the textures, of the existing concretes. Then there is a counterpart, which is these polished kind of terrazzo floors, and then kind of the ironmongery, and also the handrails that kind of builds up, from that neutral layer,
Then to go back to the Manège. We took these pictures with David Grandors at the beginning, because the users and us as well, we were very much in love with the existing building as it was. And so we went through trying to understand, maybe in those pictures where Stefano showed the existing building and then our proposal, And it was a work of trying to recognize all these colors that were existing, and kind of bring them into the building somehow. So we collected, because we thought they mark the character. So even though in the picture of the model and there doesn't look like the gray there, it's the same gray we painted the final room. Somehow now it's has much more light inside. I don't know why, because we reduced the size of the windows. But anyway, we were trying as well to get a bit the character of the garage, and in there already there was all the 50s concrete. Most of it was painted in white, and it was something that maybe came from there. And it was painted as you would paint a garage. You wouldn't care if it's timber, if it's metal, if it was just painted, no? So it came a bit as well from
maybe
that.
Just final point on your question, which I think is interesting, is that, because many people kind of question that, also on the building side. But also another thing that we did, which was quite different, is that we painted practically everything on site, doors, walls, furniture even, no? And really kind of exploring that paint as a material, no? The painters loved it because it was a really but it kind of transfers this really tactile paint property, that's it's I don't know, going back to a kind of painting reference, is talked often about kind of these Morandi paintings, which is very subtle changes of color and tone and light that kind of compose this really much, but rather than kind of strong kind of contrasts.
Yeah, but somehow when you sit on the bench that you are very close to it, you feel that there was a brush going. You have that feel of something that is being handmade.
Handmade, yes. Any more?
We have time for a couple more questions. There's one here. And Antonio also has a question to ask.
This is
Wait a second.
Yes. This is more about like your approach to transform the building, because it has two different, very different uses in the past, like the horse riding hall and then the car park. So how did you approach trying to keep how did you approach your transformation, like keeping both histories or choosing one? And
I think what we tried to do from the competition phase was, rather than, let's say, delete the 1950s intervention, that could be, it's quite a strong intervention. Probably in heritage terms nowadays, probably you wouldn't do that, because it's a building that had a different rhythm. It's a heavy construction. So one approach would have been, okay, we delete that history and we go back to a kind of past, and we kind of build from there, which was kind of a way. But somehow we kind of this was kind of a few years back, 2014-15, probably this kind of discourse about circular economy was not so, well, at least in my mind, was not so evident, But in a kind of similar approach, we said, okay, there is a structure that is there, it's been built in the 1950s, so its lifespan is still, within reason not to be used. And then also it was well built, we understood with the passage of time that there were some qualities to it. So really kind of the project really originates from that, not to maybe not make too much, not discriminate the phases from of the past, not the 19th century, but really kind of, okay, this is all the parts that I have. Is this useful for us? Is this not useful? Then the project at the end is a kind of result of decisions of, in one side, finding that equilibrium of preserving what was the original structure of the building, or let's say the volumetric composition, but another one kind of adapting it to the new use, And then the building was giving us hints, Let's say, okay, the program needs a big space. I have a big space at the center. We do that there, And then so the kind of the program start to find its way into the building. So at the end is that the approach is that one, to really work with kind of all that is given, no, and evaluate its potential and its strength, and then the new parts can just go and maybe complete, highlight, or complement, no, what that structure that we find, no, and then you take out just the minimum that needs to be taken out.
I was going to explain it in a different way.
Okay, that's good. That's
I mean, but it's more or less the same.
Two answers to the same question.
It was a horse riding hall that it was built for horses, and really there was not a connection. It was kind of an enclosed building, but a bit civic somehow in shape. But there was not, you could not see inside from the street, let's say. But from the 19th century construction, we really like the idea of having a big covered space in the center of Geneva, because it's a very dense city and there is not. So we pushed to get that in the project, to go back to the idea of a public building with a big hall. And that's why we fight for having this saal inside. And then another thing that we like is that this relation of big rooms, a very big room, two long big rooms, and then the corner towers where we go to locate the services, and that we believe is something that could be used with the same formal structuring in many years to come for different programs. So those were the things we wanted to kind of keep from the 19th century building, and then of course all the facades that relate with the history of the city, and there was these delicate works to repair them and stuff. And then from the 50s, when we went there, and as well the users, is this character of the concrete that is handmade, that is super well, has so many details on it and cast, and and it was in such a good shape, and it was so thin. Those slabs, they were like 11, 13 centimeters thick. So. I don't know, we want to keep the quality of the concrete more or less. And then came the difficult part, that is how then that building that is known for cars, that you don't want to show in a historic city, and horses that as well they don't want to show at the time, how it becomes a civic public building that invites people to come in. And that's where we had to do a civic entrance of a certain a certain scale,
a new door,
and place it. And we decided to place it in this space, in this corner, because it allows us to have a little, it's open, public space, and to create that bench that is new behind the fountain, because it was never thought as an entrance. So the fountain is facing outside, it's not facing the building. And then we decide, for example, to enclose that room in there, but just do a bench that is similar to a kind of cafe atmosphere. It's like a public city space that you perceive from outside. So people now comes a lot, people that doesn't have to do anything with the use. They come a lot and sit here and read the newspaper and do their telephone things and stuff. And for example, we lower down the windows.
Yeah, those ones show you here in this image.
For the crash. So those openings we have to lower down, because before they were done for ventilated the place where the horses were sleeping, but they were, you didn't have a relationship from the inside towards outside. And now it was going to be used for kids, so you have to transform the building for different type of uses, but keeping the strength of the past construction somehow. I don't know. Different
better
answer. I don't know. Different.
We have one last question.
Okay.
I was kind of connecting a little bit the topics that were mentioned in the questions on light and shadow and materiality, and I was quite intrigued in the first project by this relationship on a particular materiality. I remember the PhD thesis of a professor on shadows and architectures of shadows. There was a chapter on the asphaltic architecture, what he called asphaltic architecture, those that kind of try to negate light completely, through the and I found like very intriguing this materiality, of an artificial abstract materiality, this deep black. And you were mentioning you kind of specifically search for a material that would be black inside, that would be black kind of forever, that would not change, that would not have, and therefore acquires this character of abstraction, if you want, of that needs the artificiality of the material to get that abstraction, and therefore act differently in this natural landscape. So I just wanted to throw it there and ask your point of view.
I have to write it down for next time. It's really good. No, but it's true that it's funny because at the very beginning, we wanted to make it out of steel. You remember? And I was
first intuition. We wanted the border to be very, very thin.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of so have this feeling of something floating, that doesn't have a weight, so it's very thin in the border. But and I don't know why we thought metal, but
then I think metal was there was a complexity of construction, but really was that then it would become something that you paint, to achieve, or let's say, it's left as raw metal,
And that you see the construction welding lines. I don't know. It's not so abstract as maybe.
Whether then this kind of blackness, this abstractness that we really searched, really came, with with this idea of this fiber or construction that allow exactly for that blackness to be deep and throughout.
And black in there is, in practical terms, is doing two very important things for us. One is that the water can become a mirror. Because I don't think you will get that effect of reflecting so much if it was any other color, or it will change the color of the trees when you see them there. It will not be what we understand a mirror, not reflection. And then it doesn't allow any light to reflect below the object.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps us to generate this idea of that it's floating, because if it was of a different color, it will reflect some amount of light, and therefore you will see the trick of how is it supported,
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's why we wanted for the full black.
I think this is a very nice question to end up the presentation. Thank you very much for your talk today and for your questions. And thank you to Velux also for hosting the lecture.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tina, and the team for organizing this. It was a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you.